Hi everyone, it's Terry again here. So today I'm going to unpack the particular approach to grading that we take on the PG Cert. Now at this point you might have received feedback and a mark for your Module 1 submission already. You might also be waiting for that, you might still be in the writing up process, in which case hopefully this will just give you a little bit more information about the way in which we'll mark and assess the pieces of work as you go forwards. Now, before we get into some of the specifics of our mark scheme and the way we approach marking, which by the way is quite different from BIMS undergrad courses in most places, before we do that, I think it's worth bearing in mind a couple of health warnings really about the way that we assess on the PG Cert. Now, firstly, the grades that you're going to get are not actually a real measure of your quality as a teacher. Now, I think that's quite counterintuitive while taking a course in teaching. But in reality, the grades that you're going to get, they're really a measure of the success of your assignment, right? And while I think there are lots of crossovers, the skills of being able to link theoretical ideas with your practice, the skills of a reflective practitioner, of being able to evaluate the impact that you're having with your students, I think these are vitally important and they're usually contained within the skill set of being a good teacher. By themselves, they are not exactly the same thing. By the way, there are a whole load of quite interesting issues and reasons why we don't directly assess and grade your practice on the PG Cert. But be aware that, the way that you'll get your mark on the course isn't a true representation of the quality that you are as a practitioner. And because of that, really, it's all about passing the assessments. If you look at what the PG Cert is at its core, is we're a teacher training qualification, and the assignments aren't grading your teaching, they're grading the way that you communicate and articulate it. So as a practitioner, really, all that you need to aim for is passing the assessments and making sure that you are a professionally competent practitioner. Certainly anyone else that's going to be looking at your CVs or looking at the qualification that you get, no one's going to care about the grade that you receive. People are going to care about whether you are trained and professional teacher, right? So getting a pass in the PG Cert is really all that takes. So thinking about merits, distinctions, any of those high grades, I think those are a nice bonus. I don't think necessarily they're kind of the most important thing. The most important thing is making sure that you're trained as a practitioner. If we're honest about it, some of those high marks, they're kind of just academic bragging rights. So you can aim for them, you can totally go for that, especially if writing academically or thinking academically in that way is of interest to you, but I don't think that's really the target for a lot of us. And finally, as you'll see when we get onto the mark scheme, we actually grade by letter grade. We use an alpha because we have a categorical marking scheme. And the thing that you'll probably immediately notice is that the letter grade that you get may not feel emotionally the same weighted as the percentage that you get. In fact, I think some of the Sussex alpha grades look a bit mean because you can pass the course with a D. And thinking about it, if I received a D, I might feel a little bit kind of put out or frustrated, when actually that's an absolutely passable and appropriate grade that you can get for a good piece of work. Now, to quickly cover the percentages for each one of the bands that we use. As I said, we do categorical marking, so we go in 5% bands. Well, a pass is anything from 50% to 55%, and because they're in 5% bands, of course, that means you can get a 50 or a 55, and that's a pass margin. Similarly, a merit is a 60 or a 65%, and then a distinction is anywhere from 70% to 95%. And as you see when we come onto the marking scheme, that band is quite big and obviously contains quite a large spectrum of different qualities. Now, the overall grade that you receive for the qualification for your PG Cert is just calculated on the mean mathematical average of those three. So for each of your module assignments, you'll receive a grade from 0 to 100%. And then what we do is we take and add all three of those percentages together and divide them by 3. And wherever that falls, that then becomes your overall grade for the PG Cert. And if you look at the mark scheme, it looks a little bit like this. So the mark scheme you'll be able to find on your blog. It's part of your handbook, but we supply it as a separate file as well. And to take you through it, you will notice, as you see in the first 2 columns, description and alpha, and you'll see that each 5% band corresponds to an alpha, to a letter grade. And there'll be, say, an A+, an A minus as well. So if we look at the pass margin, the pass mark is at 50%. On BIM's undergraduate courses, it tends to be at 40% actually. You will notice, this is what I mean by the letter grade looking a bit harsh, because at 50%, that's you achieving the learning outcomes. That's actually hitting and showing us what we need to see for you to be, hitting a postgraduate level pass mark, right? But you get a D+ for that, right? And I think that feels a little bit cheap, a little bit harsh for the grade in terms of what it actually is. Now, if you look at the generic descriptions of this particular pass margin, it's all about, an up-to-date knowledge, an appropriate range of knowledge resources, the ability to conceptualize issues, to evaluate particularly your practice, designing and carrying out an inquiry. Really, all of these things are just asking, have you done the learning outcome? Have you met the brief? Is your evidence base, is your reading that you've carried out, have those been sufficient in allowing you to hit the learning outcome? And if we're talking about module 1, we're talking about that capacity to evaluate your own practice, and to reflect upon your values, and to create an action plan for the future. So, have you done that in an informed way? And have you prepared yourself in a way and articulated that clearly enough? You'll see further down the piece, it's a point about producing an argument with reasoned conclusions. So again, this is a real hallmark of the kind of master's level writing. We do expect you to form a clear and reasoned argument. So evaluating your practice, if you've got a central stance about that, can you give us your take about how well you've performed as a practitioner, how well you're acting in a particular situation? And of course, there'll be some minor discrepancies, and you don't need to hit absolutely all of these in necessarily the same way to achieve this particular band. But we would also expect, the appropriate conventions in citation, specifically Harvard referencing, and that your writing is generally, with some admittable mistakes for spelling, for grammar, written in clear and intelligible English. So if we jump up to the merit band then, again, getting a merit at master's level is a real laudable thing. It's, especially for your first assignment, getting a 60 is something to really be proud of. And I think, receiving a C sounds like you could have tried harder. So focus on the percentage. Getting a merit at master's level is a really good thing. You should be really happy with that grade. So what we're looking for here is a deep and up-to-date knowledge and understanding of the topic. So reading around, finding out more particular sources and exploring those in a more deep and informed fashion. So the range of knowledge resources, the range of evidence you might use, that's going to be wider, and a good ability to conceptualize issues and problems within the relevant context. So you can see where the mark scheme gets a little bit generalized at this point. Particularly, I think one of the real hallmarks of a merit compared to a pass within this scheme is in the word critically. You know, the ability to evaluate critically literature, evidence, policy and practice. So although that's written into the learning outcomes, we do expect there to be criticality within your writing, even at pass level. Having more critical thinking in, you know, exploring different perspectives, looking at counter arguments, testing your own assumptions out. These are the kinds of skills that will really jump up your mark from a pass up to a merit. And again, if we look at this particular band, we're not just looking for an argument, we're looking for a coherent argument. So one that you can guide the reader through clearly and lucidly. So there's a very explicit sense that you've found some stuff out and that you know how everything fits together. And again, we would just expect the overall quality of the writing to just be a little bit better, a little bit clearer, and there to be fewer mistakes. Now, if we jump up to the final band, the distinction band, this covers an awful lot, right? So this covers everything from 70 to a 95. So certainly when we award something a distinction, we're not looking for every single one of these particular characteristics. We're looking for an overall sense that it's tipped over the line into this. And what we're looking for is an extensive, up-to-date knowledge, deep understanding of the topic, the context, your professional practice. So we're really looking for you to go the extra mile in terms of broadening out your evidence base and taking a more, you know, a very well-informed approach, both in terms of the theory, in terms of your own practice in generating evidence there, perhaps also looking at observational feedback as well. And again, evaluating critically literature, evidence, your practice, but in an original or a comprehensive way. So this is one of the words, you know, the kind of creativity, originality phrase that gets thrown around, and that's quite difficult to do in a lot of cases, right? We're not looking in a lot of these. We're not looking for you to revolutionise any approaches to teaching and learning, other than your own. Other than to think about having something really new and pertinent and useful for yourself as a practitioner, or potentially some findings, some learnings for yourself that are you know, not revolutionary and new, but are something that are useful enough that you could share with colleagues, you know, potentially at BIM, potentially new tutors, and something that would actually be of benefit to them. And again, we're looking for a sophisticated or an original argument with well-reasoned conclusions. So again, it's about that level of complexity in your thinking, in your articulation, in the writing there, and a sense that you've kind of been through the entire process. You've thought critically, you've thought about yourself, you've thought about theory, you've thought about a wide selection of theories. And you've brought that all back together and you've had a dialogue, and you've now kind of distilled it, and you have something really interesting and vital and clear that you can say and that you can express to the reader. And again, we're, you know, I think that kind of goes without saying that we're looking for the same level of decent writing, and appropriate conventions in citation, clear and intelligible English. So those things don't really change as you go up through the band. So that's it. I hope that's been relatively useful in thinking about the grade that you've received or might be aiming for. And I'd say, yeah, if you're looking for further help, just booking a tutorial. You're always welcome to check in with us and see how you're doing and get some further support with your writing or in understanding feedback that you've received. Again, we're really keen on the PG Cert for feedback to be the beginning of the dialogue and to start off a conversation where we can help you see the perspective that we've got on your work, and look forward to how we can help develop your writing, your thinking and your practice in the future. Take care. Thank you.